morning and also good afternoon for those joining us from Central Asia today, because this is a hybrid meeting, so we should make sure that we all speak in the microphones so that the online participants can also hear us well. I would like to welcome you to the Clingendael Institute and to this meeting that we organized together with the International Tax and Investment Center, which is an independent research and education organization based in Washington, D.C. So on behalf of these two organizations, I would like to welcome you to this event on water challenges in Central Asia. My name is Louise van Schijk. I'm head of unit for EU and global affairs here at the Clingendael Institute, and also responsible for the program on energy, food, water, and critical raw materials. And today I'm joined here by the colleagues who were the main organizers, and one of them is Niels Drost, who is also our specialist on Central Asia and has just published an important report on the relationship between the EU and the region, Central Asia, out of the shadows. Did I say it correctly? And I'm also joined here with my colleague Tobias van Lossau, and he is really our water guru specialist with years of experience on water security questions, the use of water as a weapon in international affairs. And well, if you want to know anything about any water situation or river basin, you have to go to Tobias and ask about it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the relationship between water and Central Asia, and we are going to try to explore solutions to ensure a more sustainable water security in Central Asia. And I was thinking on the way here, it's quite interesting to talk about these water management issues, because that's one of our favorite topics here in the Netherlands. You might know that we are 26% below sea level, our country. And even here, Clingendael, actually it literally means a place that is a little bit higher up in the dunes. That's the old word for Clingendael. And that's quite important, but you can also notice it if you go here on bike or walk, that you go slightly up into the dunes, because we're so close to the sea as well. But anyways, the Netherlands have a huge history of fighting against the water. Usually we have too much water, but now because of climate change, we're also increasingly dealing with scarcities and shortages. And that is certainly also the case for other parts of Europe, especially in the south of Europe, where water issues become more severe every summer, I would say. So in the region, 82 million people live in Central Asia. So in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, a lot of them depend on these water systems that are under pressure. And that also leads to unequal distribution, harsh choices on who can use the water. And part of that, of course, has to do with the changing circumstances and the changing use patterns of water, but part of it is also management and outdated systems. And that's, of course, something you can work on and do something about, and that we also hope to focus on today. So, and also the relationship with energy generation is a specific point of attention in that regard. So we will have two panels with questions. One is more about how did the current situation come about, and how will also climate change exacerbate it in the future. And the other one is more about the impact of water on daily lives, or one is more focused on specifically water issues, and one more on Central Asia. And the question is, of course, what can be done, and then with a focus on what can be done by the countries in the region by enhancing their cooperation, what is the space for enhancing this cooperation, and then also what can donors do, or at least the ones that are left in today's world. With that, I would like to hand over actually to our keynote speaker, Farah Karimi. We're very pleased that you are here. You are the special representative on Central Asia at the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and you're also a member of the Senate, and you have a very long-standing track record in the space of development, and also, water is traditionally one of these core topics, and also personally very much engaged. For those of you who don't know Farah Karimi, really a well-known, respected person in the Dutch debate on these issues. And after your intervention, Tobias will take over. I will still listen to you, but at a certain point I have to sneak out for another meeting. Thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Let me begin with a moment that stayed with me from my recent visit to Central Asia last year. We were in Moynak, in Uzbekistan's autonomous region of Karakal, Pakistan. Once a bustling port town on the shores of the Ariel Sea, it now stands in the middle of a desert. There is no water for miles. We visited what is now called the Cemetery of Ships, and I saw a picture on your report from that area. Rusting fishing vessels stranded in sand, surrounded by emptiness. And there, I met a local family who had come, as many do, not just to see what was lost, but to remember. I spoke with an elderly woman who had lived in Moynak all her life. I asked her if she remembered the sea. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. Yes, the sea is a source of life. It will come back. It must come back. There is something deeply moving and painful in that belief, because the Aral Sea, as it once was, will not return. It is a human-made disaster, the result of decisions taken without understanding the long-term consequences. And the tragedy is not only ecological, it is social, economic, and psychological. The real challenge we face is that while water is the essence of life in this region, and indeed in every region, there remains a troubling lack of awareness, both within communities and at times even among policymakers, about the irreversible nature of some of the damages already done. The hopeful belief that everything will be fine again, can, however well-intentioned, postpone the difficult conversations and decisive actions that are urgently needed. This was part of the reason why I traveled to Central Asia with a delegation of international and regional parliamentarians last year. We wanted to see the challenges firsthand. And more importantly, we wanted to bring people together across borders and political systems to talk to one another and begin shaping lasting solutions. Because water in Central Asia is everything. In Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, it powers homes and industries through hydropower. In Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, it feeds agricultural systems and sustains millions. But it is also a source of tension. We have seen it in the past. Disputes between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan over the construction of the Rogun Dam, for example. But we are also seeing a remarkable shift. Countries are realizing that the only way forward is together. There has been historic progress. Agreements between Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan on border demarcation and shared water resource management are signs of a new era of cooperation. And yet, new warnings are emerging. In Kazakhstan, we heard concerns from officials and researchers that the Caspian Sea is now facing an alarming drop in water levels. caused by rising temperature, reduced inflows, and changing precipitation patterns. There is growing fear that if urgent action is not taken, the Caspian Sea could follow the face of the Ariel Sea. Let them be a wake-up call. We can't afford another preventable ecological disaster on this scale. This is where politicians have a crucial role to play. Our job is to encourage dialogue, build trust, and translate political will into action. And once that political will leads to agreements, that's when the real work begins, with people. It is essential that we engage local communities in this effort, especially in regions where past tensions have left scars. We must send a clear message. Fighting over water brings no prosperity. Only through cooperation, mutual understanding, and inclusive, locally driven solutions can we achieve long-term stability and shared benefits. Agreements on paper are a start, but sustainable peace and progress requires education, dialogue, and trust building at every level of society, from farmers to policymakers. This is also the spirit behind the resolution I had the honor to sponsor last year, the first ever OSCE Parliamentary Assembly resolution jointly prepared by all 5 Central Asian delegations. It calls for sustainable water management, the restoration of ecosystems, and enhanced disaster preparedness across the region. But one of the strongest messages of the resolution, which was approved unanimously by OSCE PA, is the importance of education. Not just formal education, but broader awareness raising to help communities understand the causes and consequences of climate change and water scarcity. The resolution emphasizes the need to integrate this education from the primary level onward, ensuring future generations are better equipped to protect their environment. It also calls for inclusive community-based approaches to adaptation, where the knowledge, needs, and voices of women, youth, and vulnerable groups are fully integrated into planning and response, because building resilience must begin at the grassroots. Another recommendation from our resolution is to strengthen regional cooperation mechanisms, including the role of institutions like the International Fund for Saving the Ariel Sea and the Regional Environmental Center for Central Asia. These platforms are already doing important work, but they need consistent support, technical, political, and financial, to scale their impact. This brings me to the international dimension. The European Union and other OSCE participating states have a role to play, not in prescribing solutions, but in supporting local efforts. That means mobilizing resources, supporting exchange of good practices, and helping to build water-saving, climate-resilient infrastructure. We must also find constructive ways to include Afghanistan in regional water efforts. The Kosh-Tepe Canal project, if left unmanaged, poses serious risks for all downstream countries. Yet, given the current political realities, engaging Afghan authorities remains a major challenge. Still, this cannot be overlooked. We need to explore practical avenues for engagement, whether through technical cooperation, track 2 diplomacy, or regional platforms. Under Uzbekistan's leadership, important steps have already been taken to involve Afghanistan in addressing these shared challenges involve Afghanistan in addressing these shared challenges. And these efforts deserve continued support. After all, water respects no borders, and neither do its consequences. In all of this, regional cooperation is not a luxury, it is a necessity. And I am encouraged by what I have seen. Central Asian countries are not waiting for solutions to come from elsewhere. They are engaging with each other, launching climate forums, forming new commissions, investing in clean technologies, and building partnerships. Let me end by saying this. The future of water in Central Asia is not just a technical issue. It is a question of justice, of security, and of intergenerational responsibility. We have a duty to act, not only because the risks are real, but because the opportunities for cooperation have never been greater. If we choose dialogue over division, prevention over reaction, and inclusion over exclusion, then the region can move from vulnerability to resilience. This is the path we must walk together with urgency and with hope grounded in action. Thank you once again. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay for the rest of the seminar due to other duties. As you know, we have our own political challenges in this country too. I wish you all a good and fruitful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for this. Thanks a lot for this great keynote speech. And yeah, you left us with a lot of proposals, ideas, and also a lot of challenges that we hope to address in the next hours. We have a few minutes left, so I would ask the audience, is there a concrete question, maybe, that you might have back, something that you would like to raise? You can, of course, also keep it for later, because most of these topics we will come across, for sure. Thank you. And yeah, with this, I would like to open the first panel. The first panel, as already mentioned, is on the water issues, the water challenges in the region, the conflict and cooperation, history and perspectives, etc. So, yeah, my name is Tobias von Losso. Louise already introduced me. I've been working on water and conflict for almost 20 years, research fellow at Clingendael and affiliate researcher at IHE Delft. And I'm really happy to moderate this session with our 4 distinguished speakers. A very warm welcome to Aliya Assubayeva. She's online with us today. She's assistant professor at the Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. Welcome, Aliya. Also, Gemma Bingham, senior analyst at London Politica, is with us today. She's our second speaker and in the room. Welcome. The third speaker, Irna Hofman. She is a research fellow at the School of Geography and the Environment at the University of Oxford. Welcome to the panel too. And our fourth speaker, also online, Iskandar Abdullayev, a senior researcher at the International Water Management Institute for Central Asia in Uzbekistan. He will join us a bit later. He said, but he is already there. There were some other appointments, but we are very happy also to welcome you, Iskandar. Welcome to the session, and I would ask now Gemma and Irna to come to the stage. And I often say water is a big word with a lot of meanings. Likewise, security is. And if you combine it, the different perspectives, dimensions, and potential actors and stakeholders, of course, the number exponentially grows when we talk about water security. So I would propose that we move on to our second speaker. I would ask, yeah, we talked about the many dimensions and different perspectives. I would ask Gemma to come in and share one very specific perspective that is highly relevant in the region. So handing over to you, and thanks for your input.
Great. So just to introduce myself first, my name is Gemma Bingham. I am a senior analyst at London Politica on the Central Asia and the Caucasus desk. My interests are particularly the Middle Corridor connectivity and the EU's investment there, sanctions diplomacy and energy security more generally. And I wrote an article in last September on Central Asian water security and specifically the Afghanistan Kosh-Tepe element. I'd like to begin, though, with discussion of the water and energy nexus. I know that's already been addressed in sort of its practicalities, so I won't go over the whole interdependent process of it, but I would like to also observe the fact that water and energy share a great many of the same problems at this moment in time. So these are things like growing consumption due to a population increase. This is also loss over distribution networks. This is low domestic tariffs and also an almost wholesale need for infrastructure renewal, which draws attention to the fact that there's an argument to be made that you can't deal with one problem without dealing with the second, which is not to make the situation seem even more difficult or even more unapproachable, but it's to point out that solutions that look for ways to involve both elements at once will be more practical and forward-thinking. With this in light, I'd like to mention a few words about the EU Central Asia Summit that happened 2 weeks ago, because obviously the intersection of energy security and water security is something that the EU is particularly interested in becoming involved in. So of course the focus is on developing supply chains at the same time as helping or persuading Central Asia to sort of diverse away from hydrocarbons in light of the sort of global market and no longer being so interested in that. But connectivity, critical raw material industry development and renewables were the focus, and also are the focus of investment. However, even as these issues rise as potential solutions, the water aspect has to be brought in as another consideration. For instance, there's been a lot of excitement about green hydrogen by the German-Swedish companies Feverend in the Mangostuu region, but there are also concerns about the water consumptive nature of green hydrogen, especially considering the Caspian Sea and the crises already arising out of that shrinking. So there's a lot of really excellent work being done on tech transfer, which I know that the Netherlands and in education on water management, which is going on, but that needs to be borne in mind as well. So the second thing I'd like to speak to is the international element. Water security in Central Asia is fundamentally transboundary, as has already been said. Water systems are not closed, and the number of stakeholders in this issue expands beyond just Central Asia. So you have Russia, you have China, you have all the Caspian Sea littoral nations, you have all the nations that are invested monetarily, financially in the region and as part of their supply chain. So there are a lot of people who are interested, and in particular, this can cause moments of friction, moments of tension. So I looked at specifically the course of the Amu Darya as it moves through and into Afghanistan, which is an area both of potential friction and really evidence of a real change because of the Central Asian government's attitude to the problem, which went from sort of slight reticence to more recently really coming out and saying that, look, this spells bad news for us, but the way forwards is that we want to collaborate, we want to work with the Afghan government to prevent some of the irrigation issues, the salination issues. It's taken a very different tack to what it might have otherwise done or might have done 20 years ago. So I think that's a really interesting and optimistic point to raise amid something that could well be a burgeoning crisis. I would also point to the sort of, in terms of more general international cooperation, a concerning trend that I've seen is this decreasing space for multilateral cooperation and a general rising protectionism, which is, I mean, we've seen it most recently with some of the chaos coming out of the White House, but a general withdrawal, a general intolerance to, using the multilateral platforms that have become so important to us to circumvent and address some of these issues. And then finally, there are some like emergent and new risks that I would raise. There are obviously well-documented water security risks, such as existential security risks, so water, food, healthcare. But issues stemming from that, like displacement and exacerbation of existing tensions. Here I'm maybe thinking about Fergana or Karakalpakstan. The second category of risks are foreseeable but alarming new risks. So perhaps Kosh Tepe could be put into this category, or for instance, the US aid cuts, which I don't think, I mean, it could have been foreseen, but I don't think anyone quite realized the scale. And the third category is unprecedented developments, so the rise of new big tech or fintech water-intensive industries such as crypto mining and AI data center consumption.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for your input. And yeah, the water and energy link very excellently illustrated how it goes beyond hydropower, which still is quite often at the center of the debate. Yeah, let's maybe have an opportunity at the moment for some questions from the audience. Are there questions on water security, on water and energy? Yeah, someone that would like to come in here? Yes, please.
Yeah, you just mentioned, thank you for being here. You just mentioned the usage of crypto mining and AI data centers in the region, centers that are mostly used by the Western market. Is that something that West, EU, America know exactly the damages that they're doing in the region, or is it something that has an effect of just continuing to expand and not realizing the effects on the global market?
So the question was on these new challenges, AI, crypto mining, etc. So and whether there's an awareness by these external stakeholders, which is also an interesting dimension, because usually the external actors are not necessarily perceived as stakeholders. But yeah, so with that question, back to you.
Yeah, so I might begin with a brief explanation of crypto mining in the area, just in case it's new information. There was essentially, I'm thinking here specifically about Kazakhstan, but there is obviously elements of it that cross into other countries, particularly Kyrgyzstan comes to mind. So there was a surge in crypto mining activity in 2021 after China banned it, and low electricity tariffs led to people choosing to mine with their surplus energy, mine crypto instead of, because it was more profitable than selling their surplus energy back to the government. This caused massive issues with overuse of electricity, and there were blackouts, and amongst other things that contributed to the 2022 protests. After that point, there was electricity rationing, and yeah, and what a lot of people don't necessarily know about crypto is, as well as being massively energy intensive, it's also massively water intensive. My stat of choice is that in 2021, Kazakhstan's crypto water footprint was 998 gigaliters. So that is the equivalent of 400,000 Olympic swimming pools. And it's also, before government cracked down on it, an incredibly unregulated environment and quite a difficult environment to regulate. So recently, as you alluded to in your question, Kazakhstan has gone from sort of this, this collapse of crypto as an industry to a reinvigoration of it under regulation. They've licensed some new exchanges. They're sort of bringing it from the grey area into the white area of fintech, and also it's part of their greater aim to sort of shift towards being internationally known for this kind of thing. I think I think in terms of Western involvement and Western awareness of what their actions do, I think people who love crypto tend to not think too much about the energy and water intensity of crypto. There's almost a slightly cultish aura when people talk about crypto who are miners and investors. So I'm going to say probably in the large part, no. I don't want to generalize. Another thing that I would raise, because this question has sort of brought a space for it, is the fact that within the question of EU involvement and in terms of the fact that there is a lot of investment that will be going into Kazakhstan at the moment, the Kazakh government has been working with its fintech industry to enter into a phase of using central bank digital currencies for public-private procurement, which is quite exciting as an idea because of the obviously raised transparency and accountability of the blockchain means that a lot of issues that private investment actors might have raised about the safety of investing in, for instance, projects surrounded with this industry, with the problem with water scarcity, might have more confidence to do so. So it's, you know, again, it's one of those grey areas of cost and benefit, but I think there are probably more costs than benefits.
So with that, are there any concrete questions to the crypto mining or the AI? If not, then I would like to move on to the next speaker and would ask Iskander to come in and to share his perspective. Yeah, welcome also, and yeah, the stage is yours.
Thank you.
Iskander.
I hope you can hear me and my voice is clear. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to all of you. And we already learned quite a lot, and my additions will only fill the gaps which my colleagues already started to provide. First one, of course, we know that water is key driver for socioeconomic development in the region. There is no doubt. And also we know that business as usual scenario will be not acceptable because it will increase competition and actually will harm the social and political development in the region. We also have to recognize that the water is more than the factors which we knew before, like technical and infrastructure, but it's also social and economic issue. Because we know this last 30 years, we had a lot of changes in stratification of society, information of different groups with different powers and capacities, which we cannot ignore when we speak about water. There are more competition and contestation and application of different water control strategies at all levels of water management. It's of course political and transboundary issue because water system which was built and operated long time for centralized system now feeds and serves 6 independent countries. Normal, different interests, political systems and needs. That's clear, and saying this, I think we have to speak about quite strong interlinkages of water resource management and governance and different levels. Because changes are happening in all levels and they are affecting our water governance and management system. It happens in everyday water management, where we have much more now change from centralized collective farming system to more of contested and competing interests of different individual and groups of producers. And they apply different water control strategies, and you have a competition in this level. At the state policies, which we are shifting from state-centric and authoritarian system to more of state policies in economic and political control. And of course, at the national level, where we have, instead of Moscow-controlled centralized control system to more of competition of different interests of the countries at the regional level. Saying this, I think we can come to the conclusion that actually the history of the water management and structures are very fluid. And they were really transforming itself, starting the collapse of the Soviet Union in the late 90s, when you had in one hand attempts to preserve regional level water system, which was in the Soviet times. In other hand, At the national level, you were setting up new water systems, which were the building like a national water systems. And there was a competition. But this competition still continued until like 1990s and 2000s, when countries started to crafting new national water systems, integrating water into the nation building efforts, and also at the same time setting new institutions. Like in the place of former collective farms, you were setting up water use associations. At the basin level, trying and testing different institutional solutions like water councils, basin water management organizations, etc. This time, I think one could see clearly that the formerly united system have been now becoming more of competition of different interests, upstream, downstream, and of course the irrigation versus energy sector. That was normal. I think that should happen because of like disappearance of the unified system, and then solutions to find out. Therefore, questions were asked about regional institutions, regional agreements, and they're like different and alternative competing ideas came in, like making water as economic good versus the water is given by God. And so this kind of conceptual competition happened in this level. I think it's normal. And then, of course, we had a lot of support from international partners to try to put the seeds of global concepts like integrated water resource management, basin management concept, water user associations. This all were mixed in the different level, and I think implemented in different levels of success. And therefore, I think somewhere starting some 2000s and 2010s, I would say there was an attempt by national governments making water sector attractive for international financing and support. Therefore, I think these concepts became and played more and more important role. But later, of course, somewhere starting, I would say 2015, 2014 already, we started to observe so-called pragmatic approach towards a problem of the regional water. We see that due to increasing uncertainty and high volatility of water supply, governments in Central Asia started to find out solutions which will not lead to the conflicts, rather will open up more cooperation opportunities. And of course, it's not easy, it's not straightforward. We first saw small pop-up of working groups between countries, bilateral working groups, which started to set up together problems and try to orient more concrete problems and find concrete solutions. And later in 2017, 2018, and currently we see these working groups became actually quite strong force behind regional processes. Of course, you have still regional institutions. They are still functioning, ICWC, IFAS, etc. Of course, a lot of critics towards these institutions. These institutions exist. They really bring together regional countries together. But the force behind changes and transformations in the region is bilateral commissions. They started to set up a lot of ideas, like water quality control, joint water quality control between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. So recently, announcement of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan built together Kambarata. These ideas have been generated first at the local level between interactions of these so-called working groups, and later it was made politically supported by governments. I think what we see is now that there will be quite serious attempts also by countries to reform their water sector. And contrary what happened previously, when countries started to try trade the water or trade water shares, now focusing more on trading more trade, not the water only. So you have a lot of additional elements which will be integrated into water dialogue. It's not anymore only water dialogue. It's more of dialogue of trade, dialogue of borders, dialogue of land, dialogue of other issues, which really makes issue more complicated in one hand, but also reduces risk to allocate very limited water resources, which is actually going to be limited. So I think high level and multilateral activities in the region is really, you can see, and it promotes, of course, water cooperation, climate cooperation, but not only. and the focus goes beyond water. I think that the interlinkages which brings countries together, including also risk of security to the security context, is also in the place. Another one thing which I observe, I think my colleagues may tell me that my observation is wrong or not right, but as a researcher, I'm seeing a lot of public activism related on ecology, environment, and climate issues in the region. Every morning when I start to read the newspaper, at least half of these publications, especially from untraditional journalism, which is internet journalism, you see related to either water, either air quality, or either climate change. So that is new thing. It's still maybe not standalone force behind these changes, but it could be, and it is seriously considered, at least in Central Asian countries. So maybe at the end, how we see this future of Central Asia with all this booming up bilateral relations, trying to solve and then address problems, including Koch-Tepe Canal, in keynote speaker already mentioned, this positive tendency towards addressing this kind of even very challenging problems gives us to think about possible 3 scenarios. One is the status quo, which is current trend. So countries will try to work more bilaterally. They will, of course, come up with some solutions, but still they will be not able to address all this complex issue of water, especially increasing and new demands and new challenges. Of course, there could be worst case scenario. We can go back, where we started. Then we will compete for limited water resources, which is not possible to allocate equally. And the last, maybe more desirable scenario, which is current cooperation turns to become more institutionalized and more streamlined and more coordinated, because still these bilateral commissions, they're very good, they're very perfect, but not good in terms of cooperation at the regional level, because 2 bilateral commissions may contradict each other. That's very easy if you're speaking about different commissions. I think all in all, we will see a lot of developments in the region. The region will be still continue being quite independent in making its own political decisions, even in regional level. Of course, external forces and international community will play a role, but I think final say will stay with the policymakers of the Central Asia. This is from my point of view, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Iskander, for highlighting already some of the opportunities and the different perspectives and dimensions, and that can also be part of the solution. And also, of course, for highlighting, the national and the regional level. And we already heard that in the beginning, that also in terms of water security, they look different. But if we look at the national and the regional one, which is a prominent one in the debate, we have similar logics or dynamics in some cases, or to a certain extent, between the national, the regional, and the local level. And with that, I would like to hand over to Irna and for the 4th input.
Thank you very much, Tobias. Thank you for having me. I had a slide with photos. Could you please put it up, our technician? Well, I can, and then please continue with the 2nd slide. Yes, thank you. So thank you very much for having me. It's really a real pleasure to be here and exchange experience, ideas, and thoughts. So it's a very brief introduction. I'm a rural development sociologist affiliated with the University of Oxford, specializing in rural and social change in Central Asia, and I've undertaken extensive research, particularly in Tajikistan, southwestern Tajikistan, where I also worked as an advisor to various international organizations in recent years, including on issues related to water. My interests center mostly on the lived experience of particular dynamics, and I would like to invite you to go down to the countryside in Tajikistan now and look together at everyday water challenges in one locality in one of the southernmost districts of Tajikistan. So let me start, or more or less repeat already what's been said. We know that Central Asia is highly diverse in terms of geography, related livelihoods, and we think about characteristics of water resources in terms of their differences in quality, quantity, reliability, fluctuations. And of course, there are differences between the urban and rural areas and livelihoods, highlands and lowlands, and differences in the ways in which people relate to water, their role in securing water. That's also related to the different strata and segments of society, so differences along class, gender, and generation. I would like to provide you with I could provide you with examples throughout the region on everyday struggles, so to say, but I would like to make it more concrete and tangible. So go to this particular locality where I spent a lot of time over the years since 2012. Developments in this locality, in my view, can be considered exemplary, though at some point from some point of view also relatively unique. Agriculture was flourishing in this area in the Soviet era. According to local experts, cotton yields were high and it was home to a research center specialized in subtropical crops. A large-scale irrigation system had been built in the Soviet Union, including a vertical drainage system because the water table in the area was high. The situation changed with the breakup of the Soviet Union, and Tajikistan's civil war worsened the impact on land and water resources, but of course, not less, on the local community. Inadequate water management in those years, in the 1990s, in combination with this disruption of electricity supplies, which had powered the vertical drainage system, severely impacted the fields. Salinization quickly appeared and became more pressing over the years, as the years passed. Farmers were expected to grow cotton, but that was increasingly difficult, and those who wanted to grow other crops experienced that food crop production was difficult. The latter was also experienced among people in the village who tried to grow crops on their small household plots, very important for food security. Land and water reforms that followed over the years from the 1990s did not bring significant changes in the area. Among the farming population, those who had the ability sought to gain access to land, to relatively good fields with lower groundwater tables, the actors with social, political and financial capital. Many men also started to engage in labor migration. Yet some of the farmers who remained, they started to address the authorities, addressing the problems they encountered, but not much changed. Among the latter, there were high hopes that the situation would improve with the establishment of the Water Association you see here in 2010, set up by an international organization. It might solve the problems with salinity. People hoped that excavators would be brought in, the drainage would be clean, and so on and so forth. Yet I recorded expression of disappointment when I returned sometime after. So while conflict over water is often brought up as a concern in Central Asia, it's not really the case here. It's rather the high groundwater table and salinization, and the poor status of the water infrastructure more generally. Some farmers have tried to take action themselves in recent years, repairing leakages alongside the address to authorities that illuminates self-determination. Very recently, people also tried to repair the vertical drainage system. You see here on the photo. For rural households in the village more generally, with which I particularly want to refer to women, the problem is water quality rather than quantity again, and the work involved in securing water. That's really a pressing issue, alongside the difficulties they encounter to grow crops on household plots. Women collect water with the big jerrycans, you see here on the top, but preserving quality is challenging in a setting in which temperatures reach around 50 degrees in summer. Women are not involved in decision-making at the village level, but play an essential role in securing water at the household level. So what I would like to highlight here is the unevenness in which challenges are experienced. Exactly this unevenness that's related to inequality, social differentiation, or intersectionality that requires attention. And the Soviet legacy also clearly comes to the fore here. As one friend of mine once concluded when we were walking around in this village, the Soviets, they weren't smart. They built farms in areas unsuited to farming. People now face the consequences. Yet consequences are experienced in various uneven ways. So while integrated water management and transition to management along hydrological boundaries, which we see today, is important, in this locality, water sector reforms have not led to significant changes in the everyday. So my message to take home here is attention to intersectionality is essential, appreciate self-determination and resilience, and be sensitive to local needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for highlighting this intersectionality and also that, the different levels that we now have in the room. And with that, I would like to open the floor for the Q&A. First, maybe one or two. I would like to hand over and give the microphone to Bezot Ikromov. He already raised his hand.
Yes, thank you.
Please.
Thank you, dear friends. Do you hear me?
Perfectly fine.
Perfect. Dear friends, it's my great pleasure on behalf of Embassy of Tajikistan to Brussels to address this prominent audience. It's even kindly organized by the Clingendael Institute. It was well said what is a deal maker for the SDG, for the health and prosperity of our people. Today, the entire world is facing this effect of climate change, and our region is no exception. And here I would like to share Tajikistan perspectives on water challenge in Central Asia. First, water is a precious common good and has been always serving for uniting the countries and people of the region. And we will believe that it will unite for the many, many decades in the future. Second, Central Asian countries have established sustainable and comprehensive cooperation in the field of water resources, governed by the regional, trilateral, and bilateral legal instruments. In addition, the River Basin Organization with well-functioning mechanism in region is in place. Just for you to understand the intensity of dialogue that exists in the countries, I bring you some statistic. Recently took place 88 meetings of the ministers of water resources of Central Asia. You know, it's very unique, starting from 1993 until today is a regular meeting. Third, Tajikistan support and commits for ensuring climate stability and strengthening cooperation in the protection and rational use of water resources. And the fourth perspective, the problem of preserving water resources is relevant not only for Central Asia, but also for entire world and requires specific, sustainable actions. Therefore, we believe that the main condition for reducing water losses is the use of modern energy-saving technologies and careful treatment of this important vital resource. We believe that as objective of this panel, the European Union and the other stakeholders will continue to introduce innovative approach in water energy cooperation in region. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to forward these points and questions to our panelists. You mentioned climate change and you mentioned the existing water cooperation mechanisms and dialogues, etc. So, of course, I think we all can agree that a lot of things are in place, but we, of course, also heard that there are a lot of new challenges to come. So I would, raise that question and bring that question to our panelists. What, if there are dialogues, the dialogues that are in place, to what extent or in what regard, and how do we have to adjust or change or widen them to address the new challenges, the not so new challenges, and to move a bit forward or a bit faster forward. Who would like to take this?
I can speak briefly about this in terms of the Kosh-Tepe issue and in terms of a sort of more general trend that I mentioned earlier. In terms of international dialogues, the Kosh-Tepe issue particularly calls into play the fact that the Taliban are unevenly recognized across the globe, because something that I think Uzbekistan has specifically asked for is that this problem be dealt with via the UN Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses, which it is currently unable to do because of this indeterminate status of the Taliban at a global level. And I think the case has been made quite strongly that in order to deal with the problem itself and to anticipate the potential fallout of the canal being constructed badly, which there is quite a lot of evidence to suggest that that is something that needs to be dealt with now. then there needs to be a space open for this dialogue to happen. And another observation that I would make is that I think this idea of knowledge brokers is a very interesting one, and one that is raised more globally when thinking about this issue, because, like I said before it's a narrative that people are very familiar with now, but there's sort of the narrowing of multilateral avenues for opening dialogues across the globe, because in this sort of fragmenting, polarizing climate that we live within now. But I think one of the great casualties of that is academic collaboration. I'm thinking here about how a lot of the work on water security in the region is done also within China and Russia, and how there's very little scope, for obvious and good reasons, for international academic collaboration on these issues. I'm not saying it's a problem that's easy to solve in the slightest, but I wonder who will lose out the most from the lack of that dialogue.
Yeah, the lack of the dialogue, also the changing tone in some existing dialogues. If we zoom out a bit more, we had the regional level, the local level, the national level. You already mentioned in the beginning, it was already mentioned, crisis of multilateralism, the decline, and the new global trends outside the region. To what extent do you think are these threats and risks to what you already described, to the processes that are going on and the challenges that need to be addressed, and but to what extent they could also be, there could be maybe also be some opportunities or new approaches. Can we see this crisis of multilateralism as a chance and opportunity to address this more on a regional level, for example? And it's probably also something for panel number 2. To what extent, that might shape the dynamics here? Iskandar, is your hands up on that, or is it from before?
Yeah. Before and after. Thank you. I think when we see these developments in the region at the regional level and how international support has been shaping or not shaping, and how it will shape or not shape the Central Asian water dialogues and discussions is very important, because actually our international inputs and concepts sometimes comes too early to the region. I remember with this IWRM dialogue, which started sometimes 2000s, and there was a lot of rejection and a lot of, I would say, misunderstanding, a lot of quite disputes were taking place. I remember both between the research groups and researchers, but as well as people who are close to policy making. So in case of Central Asia, I think sometimes these straightforward and easy concepts are not easily implemented. I mean, it's implemented in the context. For example, look, IWRM, yes, it's perfect, but still, after 20 years, we're still thinking partially only implementing IWRM, or Nexus approach, which is now everywhere spoken, has its own adaptive understanding in Central Asia. I think we have to be patient with this kind of digestion time, which needs sometimes longer, sometimes quicker. I understand that challenges are much more serious than 10 years or 15 years ago, but still there are lenses of translators, and translating this so-called people who are translating everything to policymakers has their own understanding and translation terms. So I think that from this point of view, yes, international partners will play a role, but they will of course depend on their context and receptiveness of policy making situation. Coming back to current, what can be improved, I think institutional roles of interstate agencies, I'm sure in the next session, Dinara will speak about this, it must be improved and increased, because they are ones I see knowledge brokers, real ones, who really translates before ICWC ministerial meeting a lot of documents which goes to the table of the ministers. I think their role, their capacity, and their translation capacities must be increased and improved. I think this is how I see this directly. Interstate agencies, they have to be capacitated. They should be trained well, but also they must be trusted. I think time for questioning role of regional institutions, are they needed or required or not, is gone. Only now we have to really equip them, train them, and also provide them some knowledge. Last but not least, I think duplication. We have a lot of duplication in the region, both in project interventions as well as institutions. We are creating new institutions, not utilizing fully the capacity of the existing institutions. I think this may be one area we should all globally, internationally should think. Do we need more institutions in order to solve the challenge of Central Asia? Or should we also work with existing institutions? Of course, this is a rhetorical question, but it's a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. A lot of channels, a lot of topics, a lot of dimensions, and also a lot of platforms, of course. One question from the chat was addressing the bottom-up versus top-down logics and dimensions. What are the perspectives for bottom-up approaches? What's the future? Is there a future? Is it a promising one? For bottom-up approaches, contributing to solutions or at least approaches and ways to address the water challenges. Maybe to you, Irna.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting and important question. Ideally, it's a combination of both, I'd say, because of the. For one, there of course there's no one size fits all. One of the what I actually try to show, right, that the experiences and challenges at the local level are highly diverse. So that's a challenge, but for sure, what the challenges on the ground should inform discussions and policies that are made at what is it, meso or macro level. Yes, yeah.
Which in the end could also contribute to brokering knowledge, because even if we didn't identify yet the perfect broker here, in the process, it could be a result of that process.
Exactly.
Top down.
Yeah.
Thanks. Other questions in the room, please, in the back.
Thank you very much. My name is Ferhat Mukhtarov. I'm an assistant professor at the Erasmus University Rotterdam. Very nice to see many of you, old friends and new colleagues. I was very intrigued by what Dr. Abdullayev mentioned. You said that you observed this new trend of, you called it public advocacy, but it seems to be journalism, really. Yeah. So people writing about pollution or water access issues, issues of water injustice. You also mentioned the rising authoritarianism or changing authoritarianism in, well, Central Asia, but also around the world. Yeah, development actors are withdrawing from the global south. There's less oxygen for civil organizations. Human rights seems to be forgotten. So how do you rhyme this two? What do you make of it? The examples that come to my mind of environmental protests or actions in the region, and by region I would probably say Central Asia, South Caucasus, Russia. Yeah, they are not very hope-giving. Is there a new trend? Is there a new demand for bottom-up solutions? And is there any prospect for that? Thank you. And maybe also to Irna, because Irna, I mean, you are bringing this local and lived experience and away from these big terms of IWRM and so on to what does it actually mean to live with little water, salinized land, and high groundwater. So if you are there with these realities because nobody's listening, I mean, how can we change that? Thank you.
Let's maybe collect one or two other questions here in the room. Other questions, thoughts? Please, here in the first.
Hi, thank you very much. I have a question to Irna about the You said that the challenges that many people in Tajikistan facing right now who are working agricultural sphere is mostly the heritage of the Soviet planning, where it was not considered to design agricultural projects in some of the territories that are not very good for that. Have you seen some of the examples of where the local communities have adapted their projects to the new realities of changing climate and everything else? Or is it all very depressive and no one had really adapted to the new reality? Thanks.
Thank you. Let's maybe start in the room with Irna and then...
Well, thank you for these two questions. First, response to your question, Timur. I wouldn't say this is very widespread, right? I think it's mostly confined to this the locality in the south, because problems are highly diverse. You have areas where really considerable water shortages, where farms are forced to use pumps, right? You have areas where farming is very well suitable and profitable. So it really depends on the local geography, I'd say, and ecosystem. So in that regard, it's not as severe as, I mean, it's not everywhere as severe as it is, and people do manage, so that's definitely the case. And people also do adapt here. It's just that you can't really live from farming. And that actually brings me then to Farhad's question. Thank you very much. What I've seen in this area is, well, of course, migration is very prominent throughout the region. Tajikistan, of course, relies to a large extent on migrant remittances. And yes, people in this area have left, as in many other parts of the country. And what you see is that, I think that's one of the clear expressions, right? People have started, I mean, in terms of if you think about contentious politics, for instance, people have petitioned, people have addressed authorities, but when that doesn't help, well, I think then exiting or trying to diversify livelihoods, then that's the best option. And that's what you see, that people also have sold houses or trying to move elsewhere. And that can be within Tajikistan, but of course also migration. And that's not always then permanent, but at least migration allows the other people to stay put, so to say. Yeah.
From the other panelists, comments on the two questions?
Yeah, one question maybe directly about ecological activism and increased authoritarianism. I think I'm not political scientist, but what I can see on water and environmental issues, Central Asia had quite a different dynamics. I mean, I remember being a researcher and working in the field in Khorasan. I have seen that people could close the roads due to the lack of water. I mean, that was normal. I mean, people were, and also government was reacting, actually, trying to solve this problem. So environmental problems are accepted like more social problems and not political. So from this point of view, there some activism always exists. Even early 90s, we remember this after even collapse of the Soviet Union, still RLC, NGOs around the RLC have been existing, they're working, they've been interacting. But currently things are different. The activism is changed its mode. It's more of online activism. So a lot of reactions to these papers are received and people are really actively engaged. And I see reaction. For example, air quality in Tashkent. I mean, there was measures taken by government, serious measures were taken government due to this activism. As well as the cutting the trees in Almaty or in Tashkent. The people quite inactive and they are quite, they can even take some action. So from this point of view, still eco-activism is relatively better. It's not sufficient, it's not like in Europe or elsewhere, but still I think there is some kind of feedback system, which is reaction and to the problem, and then reaction to take care of these issues are there, but it's not completely enough to address these serious challenges of Central Asia. But we can see that it's increasing and much more visible in the space of the Central Asia.
Thanks. Before we go into the coffee break, a last round of questions here in the room. Questions, thoughts, comments, ideas, things you might have heard of that you want to share with the panelists? All right, then I would pick up one other question from the chat related to Afghanistan. And I mean, we already discussed Kostepa a little bit, or we're touching upon. We not had the time to discuss it in detail, of course. But yeah, a more general question, how to engage with Afghanistan in a wider sense, in a focus on water, how to, what could be incentives, what could be a scenario, enabling factors, etc., to come together and to discuss the water issue. Maybe the water issue could also here be, a positive factor that has a wider impact on the overall bilateral or multilateral relations. But of course, one of the major concerns at the moment is related to water, so it's also a bit tricky to put that on the table. Do you see a way or, some opportunities how to ideally do that?
I think it's ongoing already. We have to not speak about future, but recognize it's going on. Indeed, recently, strategic institutes in Central Asia 5 invited also representatives from Afghanistan to participate in the water dialogue. I think it's a start. Indeed, they listen mostly. They receive a lot of information because Afghanistan has been a long time not part of Central Asian water dialogue. It's not easy for them to, not only because they don't like to discuss, but also they may be looking into their capacities, how they can really be part of the dialogue. But mainly what Central Asians, I think, could offer is technical support. Also, we had this program before the Taliban takeover in Central Asia to train Afghanistan's experts, including in water sector and technical issues, engineers. I think that could be also other way. And also there were quite interesting cooperation started, unfortunately also stopped after this change, is research cooperation between different universities in Kabul and Mazar-e-Sharif. I think that we have to be, of course, building not only the water dialogue and water technical cooperation, but rest, like trade with Afghanistan is important. Roads, which they are discussing, infrastructure is discussing. I think they see, from point of my impression, with talking some colleagues from Afghanistan, they don't separate and see especially water and just to solve the water problems. I think they would like to see at least Central Asia being part of effort to develop and recover Afghanistan. That's my impression from interactions with Afghans. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Of course, talks are going on, but let's say the implementation and the challenges have been there already for a while. So a lot of options are, of course, on the table. But to what extent, what you just mentioned, what is feasible and what not, and to what extent both sides are willing, and that is also then something for panel number 2, in which the regional integration, multilateral cooperation, etc., will be at the focus. With that, I would like to conclude that we have seen another time how complex the issue is, how many topics and approaches and policy fields we have to have in mind when we talk about water, that we see it is always a multi-level approach that we need to work on because all of the levels will be affected, all of the levels do play a role. But while the threats and the risks are increasing and we are facing different times, there are also opportunities to cooperate, to start discussions and dialogues, and to ideally address the water issues at a certain point. But also that this bridge sometimes is still missing from the ideas and the first talks and the actual project implementation. Yeah, with that, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers. Thanks a lot for your inputs. Thanks a lot also to you here in the room and also online for your questions and your contributions. And yeah, we will have a break here now for 25 to 30 minutes. And then the whole event will continue with panel number 2. See you online, hopefully in a bit, and a nice coffee break here in the room. Thank you.
All right, welcome back everyone after the coffee break. I hope you enjoyed the break, and I'm very happy to see that so many of you took the opportunity to network, get to know each other, even to the extent that we're now starting a little bit late. My apologies for the online audience for this. My name is Niels Drost. I am a research fellow here at the Clingendael Institute at the Russian Eastern Europe Center. And today I will be moderating the second panel discussion on regional cooperation in Central Asia, but also about the role of the international community, which it has to play in this. We already touched a little bit upon this during the first panel, but luckily enough, there is still plenty left to discuss. So over the past few years, we've seen that regional cooperation really has strongly increased in Central Asia, not just in terms of physical meetings and also meetings between the heads of state and other members in government, but also when it comes to formal agreements. And I think the best example of this is the settlement of the border disputes between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. And there's really a lot of optimism right now in Central Asia on this topic. And in this panel, we're going to dive further into this optimism, but also regional cooperation, and looking forward how that's going to further develop, and what this means practically for water in the region. And regional cooperation really is essential for this. Water is an inherently transboundary issue. So we're very glad to be able to discuss this today with you. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our panel speakers here on the stage with me, Mr. Cohen and Mr. Umarov. Please, if you could join us. We're also very glad to have the online participation of 2 other excellent speakers. And I've asked our speakers to, in their opening statements, share some brief insights of about 5 minutes. But we'll have plenty of time left to discuss this afterwards with you, with those in the room. And our first speaker, Yersultan Jansaitov, is head of the Chinese and Asian Studies program at the Institute of World Economics and Politics in Astana, Kazakhstan. Before, it's really great to see you. You worked at the Nazarbayev University, as well as various ministries in Kazakhstan. Yersultan, welcome. We are very grateful that you could join us today.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.
It's really great to have you with us. Can I please give the floor to you for your opening statement?
Yeah, good day everyone, good day dear colleagues. Today's topic is about water resources in Central Asia. Unfortunately, Mr. Abu Sayyidov couldn't join us today for his personal reasons. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this platform. So I'll try to be really short. So we're actually running out of time. I mean, all the forecasts about Central Asia and the water resources, they all show that we don't have much time left to find solutions. According to some forecasts, we'll start feeling the outcomes and the shortage of water resources by the year 2028 already. So it's like in 3 years. And the other dates are like 2030 and 2050. In any ways, we are losing like around 1% of our glaciers in Central Asia year by year. I think that's a well-known fact. And the more the population of Central Asia is growing, the bigger the problem becomes. But there are many things that have been already done here in Central Asia. We're not starting from zero. There is an increasing understanding across the 5 Central Asian countries, like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. We can see that every time our leaders meet, the issue of water scarcity is always a priority. There are positive steps. We can see that renewed interest in the Interstate Commission on Water Resources that was established in 1992. But after the 2020s, the Commission has revived a new impetus. And we can see the strengthening cooperation between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan lately. In recent years, we have reached a new level of strategic partnership, also including water issues. There have been signed agreements between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan on management of resources of Sirdarya and Shardara reservoirs. Kazakhstan also helps Uzbekistan introduce innovative water-saving technologies in irrigated agriculture. And also there are joint research institutes and technology parks opening to study sustainable water management. Also development of projects within the frameworks of international support. We have dozens of projects being implemented with the support of international organizations, the EU Central Asia Water, Environment and Climate Change Program from 2020 and 2024. It financed the modernization of water distribution systems and environmental monitoring. Also, our partners are World Bank and ADB, Asian Development Bank, especially in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. We are working with the United Nations, UNEC, and the other dimension is digitalization of water management. By 2025, pilot projects are underway in all countries of the region. Automatic control systems for water intake and canal levels. We are also using drones and satellites to monitor reservoirs and irrigating systems. There are also new platforms for dialogue. Central Asian Forum on Water, Climate and Energy has become a regular forum for experts, NGOs and YOS initiatives. But despite the developments, those measures are not enough. The remaining challenges by today are, first of all, it's a lack of legally binding agreements on water allocation. So we don't have much time left, but we still don't have the instrument of implementing all these agreements and all these findings, but we have to double down on that dimension, I guess. And lack of transparency and trust in the communication of water information. Still, we don't have the overall Central Asian water management system. And the conflicts of interest between hydropower and irrigation is still there. Like the highland countries and Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan will still have this conflict of interest that we still have to overcome. And finally, highly deteriorated infrastructure in most countries. So in my point of view, that's why we must build a unified water ecosystem in overall Central Asia. So we should see the region as a whole, like one body, which where the issues can be solved only when we see the region as one, as not as different separate countries with their own interests. But zooming out even further, Central Asia is not an island, so the region is tied into a larger Eurasian water ecosystem. Despite all the geopolitical moments, we are still like closely interconnected with Russia. Moscow is a player in the region's water narratives. Historically, there were discussions about the idea of diverting water from Siberian rivers southwards. And given the situation, like how fast we're running out of the water resource in the region, that plan, that's a controversial plan. Like there are many arguments that it might not work, but I think that's a plan that we should reconsider. Moscow is also interested in that, in solving the Central Asian water problem, because if the situation gets worse here, Russia will be facing migration from the region, especially from Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, the regions that will be hit the hardest. So I think it's in the Moscow's interest as well to work together with the Central Asian region. And after we come up with the solidified position about the water resources in Central Asia, we also need to act as one with the external partners like China, for example. That's mostly in Kazakhstan's interest. Ili and Irtysh rivers that are originating from Xinjiang, starting from Xinjiang, are key water resources for Eastern Kazakhstan. During the last 2 decades, China has increased water consumption from those rivers by over 30%. And Kazakhstan by itself alone does not have enough bargaining power to talk to China. So positioning the Central Asia as a bigger region with the same positions on water, that might help Kazakhstan as well as other countries in Central Asia. And of course, we should talk about Afghanistan, Kabul, as it was mentioned before in the previous session, Kosh-Tepe Canal, the initiative about building that canal, it might decline the water resources from Amu Darya by 15%, which will be an issue if that will happen. So we cannot, when we are talking about the regional water ecosystem, we cannot put aside Moscow, Beijing, and Kabul. So first of all, we have to come up with the common positions here in Central Asia, and after we also need to work with the external partners. And lastly, we also should reaffirm the role of the West. Western partners are irreplaceable in this puzzle. Their support is not only financial, but also technical and institutional. From the beginning of the 2010s, our European partners have invested more than 100 million euros here in Central Asia. And there are projects like Blue Peace Central Asia that is being implemented by our Swiss partners since the year 2017. And Western universities like ETH, Zurich, Oxford, MIT, they are also helping us in scientific research on water flows and climate scenarios in Central Asia, developing forecasting models. And also NGOs are helping countries to develop legal mechanisms for shared water use. So in conclusion, we are racing against time, and the finish line is not decades away, but it's just around the corner. We have glaciers melting, rivers under stress, and political windows of opportunity that might not stay open forever. The environmental future of Central Asia depends primarily on the countries themselves. Of course, our partners, like foreign partners, are important, but the future of the region is in the hands of Central Asians. With collective action, a shared vision, and the support of regional and global partners, we can still secure water and peace for generations to come. I'll stop here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yaroslav, for sharing this extensive overview of the issues at hand, especially the urgency of the situation and the need for this regional cooperation because of that. And the topics you mentioned, also the strategic partnerships and also the regional neighbors, as well as the European Union and cooperation within the region, really also plays into the topic of our next speaker, which he has extensively done research about, Timur Umarov. He is a fellow at the Carnegie Russia-Eurasia Center in Berlin. His research is really focused on Central Asian countries' domestic and foreign policies, as well as China's relations with Russia and Central Asian neighbors. Timur, thank you very much for traveling from Berlin to join us here today for this discussion. I'm very interested to hear also your thoughts on the topics just mentioned, but also that last week in your latest publication that you noted that for the first time since the Soviet collapse, none of the 5 Central Asian governments have any political grievances against each other. Could you please share some thoughts on this issue and these unprecedented times, but also how you see this cooperation going forward in your opening statement? Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, thank you for having me, and secondly, thank you for putting up the topic of cooperation as a main topic here at this conference, because I think this is seriously underreported topic, and many people mostly think about security issues in Central Asia rather than seeing some of the examples of cooperation. But I should say that we're living through some of the unprecedented times. I am one of those people who are very skeptical about all of the new initiatives that I see from the officials in Central Asia. But I should say what I see right now gives a lot of hope, and this is something that hasn't been seen before. I want to start quickly with why we're seeing what we're seeing in Central Asia, why those 5 countries who hated each other in the 90s now seem to really fall in love with each other and having a very good relationship, growing relationship, strategic relationship with each other. What has happened in those 3 decades that made it possible. And then I'll close down with some of the perspectives. So why it's happening? Basically, I would say that one of the main reasons is the changing generational change broadly in Central Asia, but also on the leadership level. We have the new generation of politicians coming to power, and it's being observed across all 5 countries. If you take a look at the political changes in all of them, you will see that all 4 has gone through the transformation of a political system, and the 5th one is preparing to the one. I'm speaking about Tajikistan, and it's not a secret that everybody is waiting for the transition of power there since 2016, when the constitution has been, the new constitution has been adopted. And the new generation of politicians do not bear the heavy burden of Soviet heritage. And one of the burdens of the Soviet heritage was basically the border issues and opposing ideas about national identity that all 5 Central Asian countries were dealing with, and the need to prove that the state of independency is very valuable as itself, and that's why all of the cooperation that potentially was there with each other was seen as something that would turn countries back to the Soviet times, and it was not possible to do for the first generation of politicians in Central Asia, who actually were the last generation during the Soviet time. So for them, it was basically rhetorically impossible to talk about broader cooperation. And now for the new generation, Soviet past is more of a history, although I understand how funny it sounds, considering that some of the representatives of the second generation are themselves coming from the Soviet past, but they actively portray themselves as young, even though they're in their 70s. But if you take a look at their tools that they use in social media, you will see that they are trying not to show it. And the second main reason of the possibility of closer cooperation is, of course, the geopolitical storm that is happening around Central Asia. And when big powers like China, the US, Russia are trying to reshape the world and think of themselves as this narcissistic countries who think that the whole world is, swirling around their interests. Smaller countries like countries in Central Asia trying to build up this wall that will not allow the consequences of a bigger trend to affect the stability there. And that's why they are trying their best to create some sort of a stability, predictability inside at least those 5 countries plus Afghanistan, if we listen to Uzbekistan. and trying their best to at least not have problems within the region. So my last point is that we will see more initiatives from Central Asian countries coming further. They have already portrayed that they, at least in the foreign policy side, have created this very, very I would say stable C5 platform. And if previously it was just sporadical events, now we see that C5 is actually the main representative body that participates in summits with all partners of Central Asian countries across the world. And this is a good example of how the cooperation already is working. But now the piece that you mentioned is also another example of the that the countries are getting closer to each other within the region and not only using the unity to attract more interest from the international arena, but also working on developing their own relations. And I see that in the future we will see more initiatives like that. So we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Timur. And I think geopolitical storm is really a good way to mention the current times we're right now in. But also when it comes to this regional cooperation between the countries and also coordinating facilities and other mechanisms, our next speaker is very well suited also to share a little bit more about the issue of how this cooperation, also in the field of water, is practically going on. We are joined by Dinara Ziganshina. I hope that she is there. I haven't seen her on the screen yet. Dinara, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Excellent. It's really great to see you. Thank you so much for calling in from Tashkent.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and for this opportunity to share on some successes and still challenges of regional cooperation. The first session was really focusing on some of my challenges, and the picture from my side was very, very gloomy. But my impression and the reflection on the recent events that are happening in the region, that we might be optimistic. And actually in the Samarkand forum that was recently in Uzbekistan, I heard from some of the speakers saying that it's really fascinating to see all this discussion on regional integration and cooperation, and all presidents of the countries coming to the climate forum, while we see so many disintegration throughout the world. So I think at this time, at least, Central Asia is showing the good steps towards the better communication and integration. And it's not only political statements we've seen, and the previous speakers also mentioned so many achievements in this regard of water and water-related and the economic and political integration that we also see, not only among Central Asian countries, but also with Afghanistan. I've heard a lot of discussion today about Afghanistan, and I would not agree with the terminology of the formulations saying starting or initiating discussion or interaction, because those interactions are already happening. And you can see, especially bilaterally between Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, economic interaction very active, and you see how countries cooperate. And in last September, we've been with colleagues from other Central Asian countries and the border area between Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, and also meeting Afghani colleagues. And you see that it's a very good attitude between the countries and representative of those countries in building up cooperation in different spheres, but with the economic support as the main priority, I would say. So I see as a very practical and wise way of communicating with Afghanistan, helping build the economy of the country. And it's a very clear state position of Uzbekistan, at least from I read, that it's not development or even humanitarian support, but it's really support to build the economy. Because if the country will have a strong economy, then it will be possible to talk about other issues that are happening in the region. And I start with Afghanistan, so probably I just echo with what Charity said in the questions and answer box, that we are pleasing and searching for the more active engagement of Afghanistan, but there is no actual financial support to involve the experts from Afghanistan into the regional coordination. And last week in Tashkent on water diplomacy conference, we saw the willingness of Afghani colleagues to more proactively work with the Central Asian experts on water, agriculture, and other research areas. So back to my own organization and back to what we're doing in the region. We're one of the regional organizations that are supporting regional cooperation for more than 30 years now. And what we do, actually, we serve as a regional knowledge and coordination hub that supports transboundary cooperation between Central Asian countries. And our work is mostly grounded on providing database, science-based, politically neutral, and but also operationally relevant information to decision makers. We closely working with the ministries of water of all countries. And I can talk a lot, but I really would like to highlight 3 key achievements that we have. It's providing access to data and information. We maintain regional database and knowledge base on water availability, use, and infrastructure performance, and we're expanding this information source to include other nexus-related area on energy, on environment, on climate. And this information and data is used by the national water authorities to plan seasonal allocations, and by regional organizations such ours and some others to assess trends and risk on water use and increasing demands in different countries. And here I would also like to reflect on the first panel discussion on the on mining and increase of use of water for mining and energy. And we are annually preparing water yearbook, where we provide thematic reviews of the most challenging issues or the issues that has to be on the focus. And I would invite Gemma also to exchange in this, because this year we are planning to talk about the mining and the possible impact of of mining on environment and water availability and water use in the region. And another area that I would like to mention is that we're doing is facilitating regional dialogue and expert exchange. We support technical consultation under our commission and expert platform that we have, which includes wider region. It's Russian-speaking countries that we also exchange information and research and do joint dialogue platforms that provide the platforms actually for water professionals from these countries to meet regularly, to exchange information, but also to conduct joint research, which is an excellent opportunity for all of us. And I think this continuous cooperation for 30 years, even in the periods of political tensions that we had, is a rather quiet but essential success story. And I think when we talk about cooperation in Central Asia, it's very important to understand. And the third point that I would like to mention is our work on evidence-based approaches to transboundary cooperation. And in recent years, we have advanced the uses of nexus assessments, modeling tools, and climate-informed planning to strengthen cooperation under uncertainties. For example, currently we are supporting and implementing pilot projects where water energy ecosystem trade-offs are assessed jointly with the national experts, showing that it is possible to integrate environmental and energy concerns into water and basin management planning. But I would certainly acknowledge that the challenges remain. And one of the most persistent, and that was also discussed this morning, is the need to strengthen legal and institutional framework to better adapt to emerging risks, such as climate change, changing hydrology, and increased variability. And another challenge that I see is the need for long-term commitments and strategic planning. We often see goodwills among the heads of states, ministries, and professionals, but the translation of this cooperation into long-term policy commitment and enforceable actions remains rather limited. And finally, the third challenge, we keep talking about the better coordination between the countries, but I think equally important to talk about the better cooperation between the development partners in the region. And sometimes it's harder to get agreement between them or kind of coherent work with them than between the countries. And so finally, I think that when we talk about all these achievements and challenges, I believe that science and knowledge-driven diplomacy can play a very active and transformative role, because I'm a strong believer that water is a catalyst for cooperation than a source of tensions. And this cooperation has to be built on shared knowledge, transparent processes, and inclusive dialogue. And when I talk about inclusive dialogue, it's not only about the countries and all countries in the basin, including Afghanistan, surely, but also involving youth and women and communities to ensure that this cooperation, it's really not just among the states, but among the communities. So I would end saying that it's our shared responsibility that we need such a long-term vision and trust, and build day by day through dialogue, and that it's already happening for 30 years, and we have some good results, but it's not an end in itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinara, on the very practical things that are needed to put more substance into this cooperation in Central Asia. I was very happy to see our next speaker, Ariel Cohen, nodding very enthusiastically while you were speaking. Ariel Cohen is a senior fellow and managing director of the Energy Growth and Security Program at the International Tax and Investment Center based in Washington, D.C. And he's also a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Senior fellow. Thank you very much. We very much appreciate that you traveled from Washington, D.C. to be here with us today. You recently published a report on water insecurity and all the challenges in Central Asia. And in your report, you argued that regional and international cooperation really is essential to deal with the current challenges. And I was wondering, what is needed to make this happen? Could you share something about this in your opening statement? And then after that, we'll open the floor also for questions. If you have any, please think ahead already and raise your hand as soon as you want to ask them, and we'll make sure the microphone comes your way. Ariel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Clingendael and personally Neil Drost for organizing an excellent, timely, and highly relevant conference on a topic that doesn't get enough attention: water. I want to stress that, I'm in this business for 30 plus years. There's a high level of speakers, and the younger people, to see younger people covering the topic of water and in the international context on an area that in today's world with China, Russia, Ukraine, Iran is not the top priority area. It's very important. And I'm privileged to be a co-sponsor and an organizer of this conference. ITIC, International Tax and Investment Center, is a nonprofit. We are in business since 1993, working in a large number of countries, primarily outside of my program on tax policy and investment policy, including in Central Asia. President Dan Witt worked on a tax code of Kazakhstan, a tax code of Russia in the 90s, and is very active in Africa, very active in Indonesia and other Asian countries, and in Central Asia and Caucasus. In fact, last week he spoke in Tbilisi on a big conference. So ITIC is front and center in Central Asia and on major topics of international development. Thank you for mentioning our report, the West's role in solving Central Asia crisis. The report is published in November by the Atlantic Council. We presented it in February of 25. But since November, the world already has changed a lot. In the report, we're talking about USAID as one of the leading agencies to support water policy and water issues amelioration in Central Asia. I would not go as far as advocating that. I would stress, though, that Central Asia is facing probably the most important developmental and environmental crisis in the realm of water. Luckily, the two main spokespeople and leaders of the two biggest countries, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, both spoke very clearly about the necessity to address the water crisis. And President Tokayev put the appropriate government agencies to deal with the crises. President Mirziyoyev said, we are facing a shortage of water. The population of Uzbekistan is growing fast. Population of some other countries in the region is growing fast. There's a lot of industrialization, and we're still in modernization and industrialization in Central Asia. These are not postmodern societies like some of the places we live. These are modernizing societies. And in the modernization, we talked about agriculture, we talked about Bitcoin mining, we're talking about industrial production. It requires gigaliters of water. Where is it going to come from? And in our report, we are addressing several issues. One, Central Asia is not a country, it's 5 countries, plus Afghanistan. I would like to address Afghanistan a bit further in my discussion, but the idea of countries working together after their independence originated in the 1990s. It's not a new idea. It originated with the first president of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, and he reached out to Uzbekistan. And unfortunately, the then president Islam Karimov, anxious to build or rebuild, recreate a nation, Uzbekistan was very anxious about not getting into regional cooperation. But the vision of Central Asian cooperation, coordination, and eventually some kind of Central Asian Union was initiated by Nazarbayev and articulated by him many, many times. And today, President Tokayev, President Mirziyoyev, and others are working on building more and more cooperation, which is great. And the water issues, when the water goes from Afghanistan, from the mountains of Tian Shan into Amudarya and Sirdarya, and then unfortunately is overexploited to the point that we have a catastrophe of the RLC on our hands. In the report, we break down where this water goes and which canal and in which country, et cetera, you can see it. But the point is that infrastructure is old. This is Soviet era infrastructure. So you have ridiculous things like the Karakum Canal not coated. So when they dug it, the water went into the canal, but it's not preserved in the canal. It can dissipate into the sand or into the ground, and you can lose a lot of that water. The canals are not covered. So if you cover them and you pave the cover of the canals, and these are hundreds and thousands of kilometers, with photovoltaic energy generation batteries, that changes the picture quite a lot. It's not done. The old pipe system is rusty, leaking, and in many places, unfortunately in Kyrgyzstan, we give an example, they take money from international donor community, do something, and then still when you audit these projects, you see that this money did not provide 100% efficiency, to put it mildly. So on the organizational level, on the audit level, on the implementation level, a lot can be done to increase efficiency of these investments. So how these investments can occur and where they can come from. You saw in December, President Macron of France, I mean, we're in Europe. Europeans are very involved with Central Asia on a number of issues. We do, our program is called Energy Growth and Security, so we do a lot of energy. On oil and gas since the 90s, on uranium, Kazakhstan is probably second largest country in the world in terms of deposit and probably the #1 exporter of uranium. I am a believer in nuclear renaissance. I'm not in Germany, I'm allowed to say that. If we want zero emissions, we need nuclear reactors, whether these are conventional big reactors or small modular reactors. And there are 80 designs of new reactors. Of course, not all 80 will survive, but it's new technology. Uzbekistan did cut a deal for 2 units. Kazakhstan is putting 2. There's some rumor about, I heard 3 big reactors. The short list includes Russia, China, and Korea. People live in the neighborhood they live. Russia, China, Korea, South Korea has a pretty decent reactor that they exported. So you see the nuclear renaissance comes to Central Asia as well. But specifically on water, the One Water Summit in Saudi Arabia in December, I mentioned President Macron and President Tokayev co-chaired the water summit in Saudi with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Now, just recently, April 3rd and 4th in Samarkand, my birthday, they had a EU Central Asia summit with Ursula von der Leyen, with Antonio Costa, the president of the European Council, and President Mirziyoyev and other presidents. And water was front and center in this summit. But as somebody pointed out very, very correctly, I think this was our speaker from Tashkent just now, the gap between declarations and sometimes even decisions and implementation, this is a characteristic gap of any country. You go to United States, you go to Russia, you go to any country that works on implementation of policy, and you find that this is a very common problem. So yes, with trillions of dollars of value disappearing from American stock exchanges, we are in an environment that is staring in the face of a global recession. I hope I'm wrong. I hope we won't have a recession. But it may happen. Nevertheless, there is money in this world. And the money mostly is mobilized and distributed by international donor community, be it the World Bank, ADB, European Bank for Reconstruction of Development, Asia Development Bank, the Chinese big banks. And in theory, that money, billions and tens of billions of dollars, can be directed to Central Asia in cooperation between the governments of Central Asia, because you need a muscle, high-level government interaction, right? I studied in this business in the 1990s. I designed a World Bank intervention on education for legal reform in Russia. Don't ask me how that went. And then I worked in Georgia also. So I worked with the donor community. I consulted the World Bank. You have to be very specific, and the implementation unit has to be staffed by competent, hardworking people like yourselves. So that money is not wasted, it's not stolen, it doesn't go into pockets of the bureaucrats, and it does what it's supposed to do. So in my paper, in the presentation, I'm thinking about a green C5+1 when the summits are focused on environmental issues, on water. With who? US still, and with the US today, you need to talk in terms of business. How American companies can bring technology, whether it's irrigation, drip technology, whether it's smart water meters, how American companies can make money. This is a message from the Trump administration. Green EU, C5+1, following up on the Samarkand summit. Holland, it has centuries of water management experience. My big hobby horse, if you want to know, you don't have to be interested in what I think. I think cotton is way overrated, and everybody will be better off wearing synthetics that last longer than cotton, that can be tweaked to evaporate better than cotton. Why do you need all this cotton, and especially not in an area that is so thirsty for water, like Central Asia? You can replace cotton with fruits, nuts, vegetables. There are huge markets all over the world, and Central Asia is already exporting very high quality fruits, vegetables, and nuts. So this can be replaced. Then these open canals are a disaster. Modernization of water distribution networks can be sped up. Altogether, between modernization of agricultural water usage, switching agricultural cultures, and human consumption modernization with meters and better quality networks, you can save 40 to 50% of water, which puts you in a whole different position. That acute shortage is going to be addressed if you do all that, and it can be done. Beyond that, can we stop the climate change? I'm not so convinced anymore. You have to have a commitment that is lacking. So then you start thinking in terms of adjustment. Every degree of Celsius of temperature in Central Asia will cost billions and billions of dollars in damage. Can you bring water from Russia, for example, in canals or in pipes? Not in today's environment, but maybe in the future. These were ideas in the Soviet times of bringing massive amounts of water from the huge Siberian Russian rivers. And I saw two of them, the Ob and the Lena. These are gigantic, gigantic rivers. So there are long-term visionary solutions that we're not there yet. But today, in cooperation between the countries, cooperation of Central Asian countries in particular. And how do you get Afghanistan to cooperate? I have no idea. What I do know, that the drying rivers of Central Asia, Amu Darya and Sirdarya, are suffering from, Amu Darya in particular, suffering from Afghanistan trying to do something they're not equipped to do, which is building that canal that is 15, 20, maybe more than 20% of the water. So they are contributing to a crisis in Central Asia. And then the question is, who can influence them? It's not Europe, it's not the US, it's China, it's the Gulf countries, especially Qatar, that has a lot of money and a lot of influence in Afghanistan. This is absolutely necessary intervention that needs to happen yesterday to help Uzbekistan and other countries around the Aral Sea. I think I ran out of my time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Ariel. If you're coming all the way from Washington, D.C., you're allowed to run out of time slightly. I really want to touch upon this issue you mentioned of the gap between declarations and actual content of this cooperation, also mentioned by the other colleagues on the panel. Because one of the discussions right now that we see when it comes to how to tackle this, how to put substance in there, is whether or not strengthening regional institutions will help in this. And one of the challenges we see right now is that the relations between the Central Asian leaders are really what drives the current regional cooperation. But how do you see the possibilities for further institutionalizing these relationships so that they also go beyond the personal relationships between the Central Asian presidents? Timur, may I perhaps start with you?
So, thanks. I think it's a interesting question, but if we look at Central Asia, at Central Asian states individually, we see that those are not the countries who are well known for their institutions. If we look at the political systems of all 5 Central Asian countries, we will also see that it's not institutionalized political regimes. All of them, I mean, it's also not a secret that in all of the 5 Central Asian states, the key decisions are made not in the institutional bodies that are written in the constitutions, but sometimes the administration of presidents are much more influential. So there is an institutional disbalance in those countries. And of course, when those countries are cooperating internationally, they replicate the system of decision-making to the international cooperation as well. And it doesn't mean that these political model cannot exist. We see how they exist. We see how they develop. We see how these countries are more or less stable. And it also means that internationally, when we speak about cooperation on the Central Asian level, it also can happen without heavy institutional approach, and it can happen informally. There are plenty of examples of how different representatives of the leaderships of all Central Asian countries are having closer informal ties with each other, which wasn't the case before. So from this point of view, I would say that institutions are not a must-have for something to happen in the region.
Thank you. Ariel, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that you have to have institutions. These are complex, very complex projects, the transnational projects that some of them will require billions of dollars. And to do it just on a handshake and just on informal personal relations, which is very typical of the post-Soviet environment. The chemistry, the handshake, the kickbacks, this is not the way to go. And my concern is less about Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. These are 2 countries that sort of with problems are moving into real statehood. My concern is this hyper-authoritarian, in case of Tajikistan and Turkmenistan, and unstable, problematic small countries. I'm talking about Kyrgyzstan. So the lack of institutional capacity is extremely pronounced in the three smaller countries. And 2 out of these 3 smaller countries are very important because these are net exporters of water. This is Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. The mountainous countries, the glaciers are slowly shrinking. They're building more hydro capacity. And the bigger countries are dependent on them. And for now, when you read people say, oh, there was a clash between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, it was a clash about water. But if you look around the world, Egypt and Ethiopia, because of the big Ethiopian dam, are seriously thinking about a military confrontation. And there's a race in the Horn of Africa with different countries sort of putting chips with different countries in the area. So it becomes a potential prescription for a regional conflict. Very disconcerting. So I hope and pray, because I love Central Asia, hope and pray that people will have, better judgment, but you do this through regional institutions. And that is the direction Kazakhstan was advocating since the 1990s.
Timur, before we open it up to questions from the audience.
Yeah, just 2 fingers. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against institutions. I'm not saying that we don't need institutions at all in Central Asia. I'm just trying to be realistic and thinking about the possible future scenario for cooperation in Central Asia. And considering how not institutionalized each state is, I'm just very skeptical that in the nearest future we will see any institution that will be powerful enough to make decisions on the regional scale.
Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, please. Your microphone is coming your way, and you could briefly introduce yourself once again.
I'm Tali Gulusanova from Kyrgyzstan, from Alatoy International University. Currently, I am at the Ghent Institute of International and European Studies in my research stay. So I have got 3 questions. The first question, I will start from regional institutions. So to Timur and to Ariel. The Central Asian countries, they have been trying to institutionalize regional cooperation since many years. It is 30 years of attempt, but there are major hindering factors. And I would like to, among them, it is external factor that is influencing on institutionalizing regional cooperation. So on one hand, we have supporters of regional institutionalization, so that is US, EU, and Japan. So on the other side, we have Russia and China who are against and who is hindering these processes. So, and including water cooperation as well. So what do you think about that? How is it possible in the current and future, probably Timur is due to that facts. Can you elaborate that about it more? This is my first question. The second question, Ariel, you have talked about the efficiency of donor communities that are investing into their water challenges in Central Asia. So this is the lasting debate, how to increase the efficiency of the donors' investments. So, but it is like both side issue. It depends on absorption capacity of both sides, both donor and recipient side. Taking into consideration the good governance issues in all Central Asian countries, the absorption capacity is low. But at the same time, what is happening from the donor side in the phase of implementation and audit, as you have mentioned, what can be done? That is my question. And the last very quick question is, I would like to know about Timur's stance on cotton production. What is Uzbekistan's stance on that?
Thank you very much. May I please ask you both to pick one element of the questions and a brief answer so that we also have time to let Sultan and Dinara join in on the conversation. Timur, perhaps to start with you.
Thank you very much. I think that when we say that certain actors are against internal cooperation in Central Asia, I think it's kind of shifting the blame from the real actors to some of the illusional actors. Because don't get me wrong, I know that China and Russia have massive influence in Central Asia. There is a big presence of Russia, for example, in all of the different spheres. It has extensive access to the decision makers through the informal elite ties. But when we say that it's Russia and China to blame for our problems, it is the same narrative as saying that we should thank Russia for the development that we have due to the Soviet experience or something like that. So the main problem here is that we take away the agency of Central Asian countries from themselves and put this agency in the hands of Russians and Chinese and say that they are doing everything that happens in Central Asia has to do with Russia and China, and it's not the case every time. I think that the main obstacles of closer cooperation in Central Asia before 2016 was mainly personal leaders who didn't want this cooperation to happen, like Islam Karimov and his very bad personal relationship with Emomali Rahman. And it's a well-known fact that they hated each other and couldn't possibly talk to each other without other people in a room. And in addition to that, there were many other, problems between different elites. So with change in the leadership in those countries, we've seen, completely new atmosphere. Political vibes have changed with the new generation, and it's not about Russia and China. It's about us. It's about ourselves, and sometimes we just have to look in the mirror. And the second question, sorry, I didn't get content production. Oh, cotton production. Very quickly, I would say that cotton is not there only because we wear cotton, but it's mostly, I would say, gunpowder. And considering what's happening right now in the world, I don't expect the production of gunpowder going down, but actually going up. And it will be very important aspect of export of Central Asian countries to not only Russia, but also other parts of the world. And yeah, unfortunately, cotton production will continue to grow no matter whether we want it or not. So yeah, that's my take, and I don't really see, I see the problem in it, but I don't see how we can solve it, considering that military lobby sometimes are the most influential people in decision-making circles.
Ariel, how do you see this?
While I agree that when we are analyzing and addressing these issues, it is very appropriate to put responsibility on the shoulders of the decision makers in the region. I am also cognizant, probably because of the book I wrote called Russian Imperialism, and looking at the collapse of the Soviet Union and looking at the Russian Empire. Look, these are post-colonial spaces. And the influence of the metropolis in Moscow is still there. And if you look at the disparity of power, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I look at power in international relations also, right? I'm a realist. And you see the disparity of power, let's say, between China and Central Asia. You can see all the levers of power, be it in case of Kazakhstan. How do you export oil, which is your number one export commodity, through Russia? Something happens, oops, 2 terminals out of 3 in Novorossiysk are not working. Oops, this pipeline is being shut down. In case of China, oh, you won't do this? We're going to shut down this investment project, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of power. These former colonial metropolis in Moscow and the emerging global center of power in Beijing can exert on this region. Luckily, for the topic of our discussion, water is kind of a neutral, warm and fuzzy issue. And you're absolutely right. I looked up very briefly the role of cotton in the production of explosives. It is significant and it's tragic, but yeah, the demand is there. And there was a question about institutions also. Yeah, just one word about institutions. It's not that Russia or China are against international institutions. They're just in favor of their own institutions. I can recommend to you a report by Sergei Karaganov, Dmitry Trenin, and one other co-author out of the new school, Высшая школа экономики, Higher School of Economics for 23. They're openly saying, we are going to use BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization to bring any and all countries away from the West. So yeah, their institutions are important to them, okay? Can any of these be instrumental in water improvement and development? Yes. I mentioned them. Asian Development Bank, EBRD, if it's a World Bank funded project, World Bank, et cetera, and as much as Central Asian countries can stand up their own institutions, those can be also efficient. And by efficiency, I mean, yes, transparency, good governance, audits, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Ariel. Maybe to make the bridge to Yersultan, who has done extensive research also on the cooperation with China. How do you see this issue also in relation to the institutions and organizations led by China, the whole issue of power that Ariel mentioned? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I do agree with Mr. Cohen. China, Russia, those kind of big powers, they are not against institutions. They're just following their own agenda. And talking about Central Asia and the institutions in Central Asia, of course, we need them. But unfortunately, we're not living in Europe. We don't have much time. And we don't have much time to discuss all these issues. We just need to start acting. Even if those institutions are not yet working properly, we have to find a way to get the things done. Because as I've mentioned, and as everyone knows, we don't have much time till the crisis hits hard the region. So given our situation, we have to use every opportunity and every working solution to try to fix the water crisis, or at least get the situation better. I do agree that the region is not really well developed in the terms of industrial production, where we can use the word post-colonial, like from the Western point of view, but we have to work with the resources and with the development that we have now. So given our situation, we'll be following more or less what Deng Xiaoping said. Doesn't matter what the color of the cat, as long as it catches the mouse. So institutions are good, but any other working options are good as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sultan. Going towards the closing of the panel discussion slowly but steadily, I want to give the floor also to Dinara, because one of the arguments you made in one of your publications, in a policy brief you recently authored, is that strengthening transboundary water institutions in Central Asia, in order to make that happen, there need to be bold choices. They need to be made. Could you perhaps elaborate on what kind of bold choices are needed to strengthen these institutions and how viable you see this?
Thank you for your question. I would say that we really have to rely on existing practices and institutions. We had a lot of discussion today about the institutions and how different even we can perceive them. And as one of the speakers was saying, it's a lot of formal and informal connection and institution, and sometimes very centralized and coordinated system work well in certain circumstances, as in the Soviet time. It was very efficient, and we see that the whole system was working well because it was one centralized power that would ensure the compliance of the decision and providing funding. But I think it's also important to understand that it is very difficult for the new independent countries to come up quickly with one regional integration entity that will have one voice or one decision-making power. I don't think that it might be possible. So what we're searching for is for some kind of more relaxed coordination mechanisms that can ensure that the decisions are taken and implemented accordingly. So I don't see that it will be possible to include all the relevant entities into this decision-making body, because when we talk about the water in Central Asia, it's a range of different issues that were raised also today. It's about energy, it's about agriculture, it's about ecosystems. So it's impossible to have all these main actors, the ministers. I'm talking now about regional water, energy and environmental cooperation on place. But still it's possible to have coordination mechanisms and informed decision-making structure that could provide strong evidence for benefits of this cooperation, but also support throughout this whole process different decision-making steps and also try to think how we can combine with the new emerging market-based relations between the countries. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes very difficult to assume that it's only ministries or public authority build this cooperation. This cooperation also very much supported by the private sector, state-owned company. When we talk about the hydropower production and about the even reservoir operation in most of the Central Asian countries, it's either private companies or state-owned companies, but still with some kind of market-based interaction and mechanisms needed. So it's a whole different set of partnerships and networking, and not only the very hierarchical system is needed to ensure that it will be fit to the present circumstances and needs.
Thank you, Dinara. So we touched upon this panel also, and in the earlier one on how Central Asia is running out of time to solve these issues. Unfortunately, during this panel, we're also starting to run out of time. So I'd like to kindly ask the speakers, give you the opportunity to share in 2-3 sentences your takeaway message, what really should be the takeaway message for today. Ariel, may I start with you?
Well, I had two fingers to what the colleague just said, and I bring it based on my interaction with some of the diplomats from the region. When we did this report on water, they said, oh, you cannot possibly advocate for the private sector solutions in the water sector. I said, why? Oh, because water, and this was a relatively young person, a person probably your age. Water is, people don't understand that water is from God and it's a public commodity. If you want waterworks to work, you have to bring private sector expertise and has to be a profit motive in this. Otherwise, it'll be state-owned or municipal and it won't work well. So what's fascinating in this whole area is how we, in this conference, talked about the necessity of interstate cooperation, government commitment, and I would add now private sector commitment. And the modernization of the water sector we're talking about that will bring tens of billions of dollars into the region. If these are the investments, be it from international government banks or the private sector, it has to be clear-cut, transparent, well-managed, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a huge sector, and I sincerely hope for the sake of Central Asian countries and peoples and the population that in some cases is suffering tremendously. You saw the pictures. People don't have a pipe with the running water. It has to be done. It has to be done quickly. We are running out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Timur.
If I have only, I have only one take that I want you to walk out from this room with, and it will be Central Asian Agency. It's not a bad or a good thing. It's not there only when you want it to be. It's just a matter of fact. Central Asian countries make decisions. Yeah, like many other countries across the world, and that's the reality. And when you're being told that it's Russia, for example, imposes the new laws that are being implemented in Central Asian countries, or that it's China making Central Asian countries to say this or that particular thing about, say, Xinjiang, for example. Don't take it for granted. In most cases, it's Central Asian leaders who are looking at the world from their pragmatic point of views and making those decisions. So, yeah, that's the only thing that I wanted to be my last point. Thanks.
Excellent. Yersut, on your 2 cents.
Yeah. The first one is this issue cannot be solved only by one country. We are sharing the same region, so we need that collective approach. And the second one is we have to be realistic. We cannot solve this issue without our partners, like our neighbors, Russia, China, and we have to work closely with Afghanistan, whether we like it or not. So we have to take like realistic solutions, and we have to do everything fast. We're running out of time. That's it.
Dinara, please, could you share your last 2 cents?
Yes, thank you. I do agree with the partnerships and including also research partnerships, but to that I would add accountable partnerships. Sometimes we are expecting from someone that public has to do something, government has to do something, but we have to be aware of what we are doing and to be responsible for our own actions. And another thing which is very important and we did not talk too much today about is efficiency. We keep talking about the cotton production, but we have reduced in Central Asia crop production area, and water use efficiency increased and water productivity is increasing. So it's very important to focus on more water use efficiency, which region is also already doing, but even more focus has to be done on this part of the story, that resource use efficiency has to be profitable. Then we will bring the private sector. Then we engage the final users of the water and the resource and be more efficient in general. Thank you.
So take in the private sector towards Central Asia to solve these issues, make sure that Central Asia has and remains the agency when it comes to these issues. Being aware that Central Asia is a shared region. Of course, it's multiple countries. It's not one country, but still Central Asia is in this together. And actually making these partnerships accountable and looking at the efficiency of things. With that, I want to close this panel and also this event. Thank you very much also to our partners at the International Tax and Investment Center. We were very glad to be able to cooperate with you to discuss this timely issue and to make this happen. So thank you very much for the excellent cooperation. And also thank you to all speakers who called in from abroad from Central Asia and also joined us from Europe and the United States. There's still much more to discuss, for which these panels will not be sufficiently, but luckily there will still be a lunch for the next half hour in which we can continue these discussions. And also to the online audience, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us at this event. And we're looking forward to continuing this discussion during lunch. Thank you.